Welcome, everyone. My name is Maureen Wilson, proud councillor for Ward 1 in the City of Hamilton. It's November the 16th, 2023. This is a virtual Ward 1 meeting, and we're talking about MTSAs, Major Transit Station Areas. And there's been a number of opportunities to have this discussion both live in person and also virtually. But because we're a little bit nerdy and wonky in Ward 1, we wanted to give you one more kick at it because it's important to the future of Hamilton and it's exciting as well. We have an abundance of riches tonight joining us from the City of Hamilton, from the Planning and Economic Development Department, specifically the Planning Division, the City Manager's Office, the LRT Office, and the LRT Project Office. So it's my pleasure to introduce them to you now. Lauren Vrates is a Senior Planner in the Policy Planning section of Sustainable Communities. Charlie Tolman is a Program Lead, again in the Policy Planning section. Dave Hayworth is the Manager of Sustainable Communities, and I think Anita is with us way back, I'm not sure, the Acting Director of Planning and Chief Planner. And Jessica Scott is the Manager of Communications and Engagement with the LRT Office, and Chris McGafferty is the Manager of Design in the LRT Office. Thank you. So I'm going to hand it over, I believe, to Lauren.
So, there we go. So thank you, Councillor, and for having myself and the other members of staff here tonight for this meeting. Some may already be familiar with the Major Transit Station Areas project, but I'm just going to go over a little bit of the background to give some context. So Major Transit Station Areas, or as we refer to them as MTSAs, are defined in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe as the areas including and around any existing or planned higher order transit station or stop. They're generally defined as areas within an approximate 500 to 800 meter radius of the station location, representing about a 10-minute walk. So there is some flexibility in that definition a little bit there, and yeah, but it's generally about a 10-minute walk radius. And the city's official plans, we have to have them conform with the provincial plans, like the growth plan. And so we need to plan for the MTSAs around the LRT station or LRT stop locations, as well as the GO Rail transit stations, to be in line with the growth plan. The city does have some policies that we've included in the official plan that were added through the first phase of our policy conformity related work. And these provided the structure for these more detailed policies for major transit station areas to come through this phase. So on this slide, we have, this shows at a very high level, the 800 meter radius circles drawn around each location, MTSA, and creating the MTSA radiuses that were considered through this process. So there's 17 LRT B-line stop locations and 3 GO Rail transit stations that were considered. The growth plan does specify that the city must achieve minimum targets for these areas for development, and these are density targets. And this is because the LRT corridor and the GO Rail stations are considered strategic areas for growth, and notably the LRT corridor is considered a priority transit corridor. And for areas along the LRT corridor, the minimum target in the growth plan is 160 persons and jobs per hectare combined. And for the lands around the GO Rail stations, the minimum target is 150 persons and jobs per hectare combined. So the target is actually not set to any provincial timeframe. Rather, it's a build-out target. So it's the demonstration of the ability to meet the density target based on a full scenario, a full build-out scenario of the area. And so it's it's considering all land being used to its greatest potential based on the policy framework that we currently have in place. So the purpose of doing this work, it's meant to analyze the city's current land use policies that we have in terms of their ability to achieve those minimum density targets that I just spoke about. And then, so we're trying to determine which areas can meet the targets, and we're also looking to determine which areas maybe cannot meet the targets. So we're looking to consider whether the city should identify some major transit station areas as protected major transit station areas. And these are, I'm going to speak about these in the next slide, but these are potentially areas where inclusionary zoning could be applied. But they do require a bit more work, and I'll go into that in a little bit in the next slide. But we need to also determine what other considerations the city should think about when we're planning these specific MTSA areas for intensification. And then finally, what land use policy planning updates are required to be brought into the Urban Hamilton official plan. And I will mention here that the project because this is a conformity related amendment to the growth plan, these policy updates, they have to be approved by the province. So the council would approve them, and then they would be sent to the province for approval as well. So I mentioned protected major transit station areas, and just to throw another acronym, PMTSAs into the mix. And so they're, like I mentioned, a subset of major transit station areas. A lot of the same work that we are already doing for the major transit station areas work would be required to identify a protected major transit station area. The Planning Act, they're not defined in the growth plan, but they are detailed in the Planning Act in terms of the regulations. And so we have, just like the MTSA work, you would have to define the minimum people and jobs per hectare, as well as the authorized use of land, buildings, and structures. And the more detailed work is really coming down to defining minimum densities for buildings and structures on lands in these areas. So through our first round of conformity-related work, we actually got away from assigning densities in a lot of prescriptive areas. And then this work is kind of looking to put that back in place in certain protected major transit station areas. So it's a bit of a, we're just trying to figure out how we do that on our end. And yeah, so it's a little bit more detailed work that we have to do that. But the advantage is that if we do define protected major transit station areas, they are areas where we could potentially apply inclusionary zoning. So Charlie's going to speak about that now, just on the next slide.
Great, great. Thanks, Lauren. So major transit station areas and inclusionary zoning are linked through the Planning Act in Ontario. And as Lauren mentioned, the Planning Act restricts inclusionary zoning only in only two places. One is major protected transit station areas, and the other one is something called a community planning permit system, which I won't get into here. And just taking a step back, essentially what inclusionary zoning is, it's a way of cities to require that new market rate development or redevelopment must include a certain per percentage of its units as being affordable. And it is just a tool to increase the supply of affordable housing at the local level, but it is a valuable tool because it essentially allows the city to require a certain percentage of units to be affordable, but the city is not required to give the developer anything in exchange. So there's no sort of grants or sort of tax breaks tied to it. Under the Planning Act, and more recently under Bill 23, the province has been very clear and sort of very defined in terms of when and how municipalities can apply inclusionary zoning. That is important to keep in mind with the MTSA work, just so you understand that, you know, the city would be looking at having inclusionary zoning, but there's sort of hard boundaries around it that the city would have to adhere to. And some of these requirements include that they can only be applied to developments that contain 10 or more units. And under Bill 23, the per percentage of units that would have to be affordable would be capped at 5% of a unit. So if there's 100 units being built, the city under inclusionary zoning could only apply an affordability requirement to 5% of those under inclusionary zoning. There may be other incentive programs to increase that, but just focusing on inclusionary zoning. The province also defined the maximum affordability that the city can impose through this to 80% of the average resale price of ownership units or of medium rent, I believe. So if the medium rent was $2,000 a month. Under inclusionary zoning, a city couldn't require a developer to rent units below $1,600 a month. The province also requires municipalities to review inclusionary zoning every five years and provide monitoring reports on those affordable units every two years. And perhaps most importantly, one of the requirements that the province has is that the province requires the city to undertake a assessment report that looks at the market impacts of inclusionary zoning, and basically they need the city to prepare pro formas of redevelopments, of potential hypothetical redevelopments within the protected major transit station areas to show that by the city requiring inclusionary zoning, it wouldn't result in the types of intensification projects that we want to see. So mid-rise mixed-use buildings from no longer being financially viable. So, so with all of that said, this is something that the city is pursuing. We currently have a consultant retained to prepare that market feasibility study in anticipation that as the MTSA work moves forward in sort of anticipation of protected major transit station areas, we will have the work done to also bring forward, work and hopefully recommendations on inclusionary zoning as sort of a part of the whole planning around transit station areas. So that concludes that slide. If I'm going to take it over, thanks.
Thanks, Charlie. Okay, so that was a snapshot into PMTSAs and inclusionary zoning. But just getting back to how the work was done for this MTSA project in terms of defining densities, because that's really the phase that we're at right now. So to do this work, we have been working with Dillon Consulting to produce the draft boundaries around each of the stations and stops and their estimated build-out density. So this slide just shows an outline of the approach that they've taken for this work. So the first was to refine the MTSA boundaries from those concentric circles that I showed on that earlier map to boundaries that more follow the street and block patterns in each area. And then they defined an intensification area in each MTSA. And that is to say that this is an area that we anticipate the majority of development, where we anticipate the majority of development will occur. But it's not to say that we didn't consider the potential increase in densities in the neighborhoods around. But we did have to kind of scope where the modeling exercises were being undertaken for each area. So they did do some modeling work to consider how our current policies, land use planning policies, inform the growth potential in each area. And then also accounting for things like neighborhood level intensification, like additional dwelling units as part of that calculation of the potential density. And then they use this information to estimate the job and resident forecasts in the area. And then they divided that by the land area to come up with a final density output. So here's an example of the refinement of one MTSA. And so this is the area around McMaster University. So the blue line on the outside, that kind of big outer edge, that is the area that the growth plan density number is calculated from. So, and then the pink area that you see in the middle is the intensification area. And like I mentioned, this area was used as an area to scope potential modeling. And it's because it's the area closest to the corridor, it's the area that's likely to see the most redevelopment activity likely to occur. And the next series of slides that I have here are really just going through the major transit station areas that are within Ward 1 and just going over some of the potential densities that we've come up with, that Dillon has come up with through their modeling exercise for each one. So start with, we'll stay with the McMaster MTSA. It's the westernmost area of all the LRT B-line corridor. And the boundary extends from Ewan Road in the west to Haddon, and from Willow Crest in the south to the edge of McMaster's property adjacent to Coots Paradise. And it does include a large area of land, about 200 hectares, and has an estimated density of 87 persons and jobs per hectare currently, but the potential build-out density has been estimated around 175 persons and jobs per hectare. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the LRT stops need to meet a minimum of 160 persons and jobs per hectare. And so this one is coming in at being able to demonstrate that it can meet that provincial target. And then the next is the Longwood MTSA. And this area includes Westdale Village and lands extending out toward the highway corridors and McMaster Innovation Park. The initial modeling indicates that this area may not be able to meet the minimum target of 160 persons and jobs per hectare. One reason for that is that there is a lot of land area that's part of this area that is part of the highway corridor that is regulated by the MTO and would not necessarily be and can't be developed because it's a highway, or may have development restrictions on it because it's a part of the MTO corridor. So that does reduce the overall density. And then we will be looking further into McMaster Innovation Park just to get a sense as to where they are with their master planning process, because we know that that is underway. So looking to that. And perhaps when this comes forward, this area may be able to meet the density, but the factor of the highway does add a significant land area that may mean that it might need an alternative target. And then the next is the Dundurn MTSA. So that's extending from Chatham to York Boulevard and includes the west side of Lock Street. This area is shown to potentially meet the density target, coming in at about 161 persons and jobs per hectare. Staff have included the red dot here on the mapping just to show the changed location for the LRT stop that was announced yesterday. So we are this news is very new. I wanted to show it on here, but I think what initially we're seeing, though, is that it is still within that intensification area that was already defined. And so it's not likely to cause a major change in terms of the overall mapping that's been done. But this area, it's about 82 hectares in size, and the potential density output is coming in, like I mentioned, at 161. So it may end up being that this area would be able to meet the density target anyway. Oh, sorry about that. I have the Ward 1 boundary on here as well, sorry. And so further east, this is the last slide that I have for the Ward 1 area. And this is the Queen MTSA. And this area, it includes lands from Charlton Avenue to Barton Street, and then includes the east side of Lock Street and then over to Bay. There are lands in this area that are part of the downtown Hamilton secondary plan. And so they do have higher density planning permissions already included. And the intensification, so that's why the intensification area looks so large in this area, because it does follow the boundaries of the downtown Hamilton secondary plan. And this MTSA is showing that it can exceed the provincial density target of 160 persons and jobs per hectare, coming in at about 352 persons and jobs per hectare. So that's pretty consistent with what we're seeing in all the downtown major transit station area locations. I'm not going to go into all the ones east of this, but generally the ones that are in the downtown core are coming in quite high in terms of potential densities. And then, so in terms of the overall results, there were 14 of the 19 MTSAs that are shown that they can meet the provincial density target, and 5 that may not. And so those that can't meet the target, we need to consider potential policy interventions that may assist in potentially bringing the density up in those areas. But there are some areas that, you know, even if there were permissions changed, the MTSA may not still be able to meet the target, and the province in those cases would need to approve a lower target, and there would need to be justification from the city provided for that lower target. So I just wanted to note the Gage Park major transit station area here. Even though it's not part of Ward 1, it is an example of an area where we're likely going to need to request an alternative target. So Gage Park, it's a large land area. It's not going to be redeveloped. And because of this, the density in this area is always going to end up being lower. It kind of dilutes the density of the overall area. And also similar, there's a narrow corridor here along the transit corridor. It's very narrow for future potential intensification. So even though there's a lot of land in the area, with single detached homes that could be considered for potentially some converting to additional dwelling units. It's likely that those intensification efforts will not provide enough density to meet the target. So this is one where we really do think that we are going to have to provide justification to the province for a lower target. And then we've been in the process of undertaking engagement on the MTSA project for some time now, but over the course of October, November, we've been conducting in-person public meetings. We did a virtual public meeting, which is recorded and live on, the and post on the Engage Hamilton page. We're planning to wrap up our engagement activities on Engage Hamilton by November 30th. So if you would like to comment on the information that's there, you have until that date to do that. On that Engage Hamilton platform, we have an interactive story map that Dylan's created for us. You have the ability to provide comment directly through the Conveo tool on the Dylan report that they prepared. Or you can simply use the comment and feedback form that's on the page as well. So you can review the report and provide a feedback if you just have some higher level comments. And then after the Engage Hamilton page has closed, we'll still have access to all the documents on the draft report and our staff reports on the project webpage, hamilton.ca/MTSA. And here's a snapshot of where we go from here. So after the end of November, we're going to review the comments and start working with Dylan on the revisions until the end of the year. We'd like to be in the stages of preparing a draft official plan amendment in the early part of 2024. And because this is a conformity-related amendment to the Urban Hamilton official plan, the city will need to hold an open house meeting to present the changes to the OP to the public prior to going to a statutory public meeting, like when we go to planning committee. And then once the final amendments are through planning committee, through a statutory public meeting and approved by council, they are then sent to the province, where the province is the final approval authority on these matters. So thank you again for having us here tonight, and you're always welcome to reach out to Charlie and myself after the meeting. Our emails are on this slide, and if you have any subsequent questions about the project, but I've also included contact information here for Jessica Scott, who's with the LRT office, and some information about how to get in touch with Metrolinx about the LRT project specifically. So thanks again, and now we can, I guess, move forward to answering some of your questions.
It's just asked, can you share again how you calculate the potential maximum density?
Sure. I can start off and maybe Charlie can jump in if he wants. So what Dylan did was we first delineated the boundaries of each of the major transit station areas, and then we looked within those boundaries at the existing policy permissions and zoning that apply. So we were essentially looking to test our existing policies, right? So the first round of our major transit, or the first round of our conformity related work for our intensification policies, this was OPA 167. I don't know, that's maybe not relevant to some people, but relevant to us because it was a lot of amendments that we brought in to really work on intensifying our nodes and corridors around the city. And so we're really testing those right now. And so we're looking at the permissions that already apply, and then Dylan was using those permissions in those pink intensification areas to build a model of potential building floor plates using some urban design criteria. They were using a 3D modeling exercise called City Engine to do that. And so what that did was you build in a whole bunch of assumptions about what could be built on the property. And then those numbers help give an estimated persons and jobs. So if you're assuming a certain number of people per unit, a certain number of employees per commercial floor space, and then all that information goes into gets divided by the overall land area once you have those assumptions in place. And then it does take into consideration the accessory dwelling or additional dwelling units for certain across the corridor. It's a little technical, but I hope I got the answer across. And if you're unsure, you can still reach out to us. It's all in the report as well. They go over it in much better detail than I did.
Just out of curiosity, how does this relate to the transit-oriented corridor plan that was put together many years ago.
I might let Charlie, Charlie and I have been looking at this is the talk corridor has really informed a lot of the defining of the intensification areas in a lot of cases. You know, we already have like the zoning in place for transit-oriented development in a lot of these areas along the corridor, as well as some mixed use and commercial zoning as well. So yeah, it has informed it. That work I think is really integral to this. It also provided some information about like appropriate step backs from neighboring properties, things like that. So Charlie, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you touched upon it. So all the previous talk zoning is shown through the modeling that Dylan did, and you know, for some of those station areas that aren't meeting the targets, we're sort of taking in all of the feedback now, and you know, we may have to look at updating some of those boundaries slightly, but we're sort of getting input on the work that's been put together to date. And you know, I wasn't around when that work was done, but I've read through the reports, and it seems like there was a lot of public engagement then, and a lot of, you know, talk about design and how those corridors should look. So we are keeping that information with us as we're working to finalize the MTSA work.
Do you have an estimate now of the amount of affordable units that could be produced through inclusionary zoning in PMTAs? Have you identified the PTMAs yet?
I'll take that. So we haven't identified the PMSTA. Sorry, it's been late yet. Dylan Consulting in their draft report has recommended that we just make all of the station areas PMTSAs, just to sort of keep our options open for inclusionary zoning, assuming that the market analysis I spoke to can also show that those areas do meet the requirements for inclusionary zoning. So, you know, we are looking at potentially all station areas as major transit station areas, but as the inclusionary zoning work continues along almost parallel to that will also give us information on sort of what that work has found in terms of that market piece that we have to do. So yeah, and then in terms of the amount of units, unfortunately in Ontario it's very per ascriptive under Bill 23, and it's capped at 5% percent. So under inclusionary zoning, we couldn't require half of all the units be affordable based on those criteria. But there are many other sort of programs out there at the city, province, federal level that are also looking at, you know, encouraging affordable housing near a transit, and we'd hope that any new development that happens there, they take advantages of as many sort of tools that are out there to increase, you know, both attainable and affordable housing.
Could I just jump in here on the inclusionary zoning piece? Just a little bit of background, because as both Lauren and Charlie have noted, the 5% cap put in place by the province is relatively new, but the history of provincial action on inclusionary zoning actually dates back to the Kathleen Wynne's government, in which at that time they introduced the concept and enabled any municipality in Ontario, I believe, at their wish, to put in inclusionary zoning permissions anywhere in the city. And the Ford government, immediately after being elected, determined that it was only to be allowed along major transit corridor routes, and then has further capped it to 5%. So just a little bit of history on that one. Thanks. I do have some questions from someone who was not able to attend this evening, but will be watching the video subsequently. So if there's an opportunity, I could ask them on their behalf. Is there an effort in identifying global global benchmarks for well-done transit stations and applying those lessons to Hamilton?
I can't say global benchmarks, but what I can say is that like just general principles of good planning and complete communities would be, paramount when we're doing our planning for transit-oriented development, right? So we're looking at providing a mix of places for people to live and work. We're looking at providing, high quality public realm. So it's really about creating opportunities of creating a really livable areas around transit to encourage people to take transit and make it part of their daily experience, right? And so making that as and providing options for housing, like I mentioned, providing options for, we've even been talking to staff in our sustainable mobility group about, how do we integrate options for, or how do they consider options for things like enhanced SOBI service, right? And like in these areas, right? So it all comes down to a lot of different components of city planning and integrating all those processes together to really make the focal point of the area transit, but also make them really high quality communities where people want to live.
Thank you so much. The next two questions are with respect to the areas in and around, I think, transit stops. And Jessica and I were having this discussion earlier this week. Is there an opportunity to co-create the areas in and around the stations with local community? So we've talked about transit-oriented corridors and the pre-zoning that's been done. We're talking about density standards being set out by the province in which we are seeking to meet. And but what is going to be the role of the community, if anything, with respect to the design, feel, look in and around those immediate transit stations? Who would like to take that one on?
And I can start. So are you referring more to like the private realm? So like private developments that are sort of built in and around those stationaries, or do you mean like the infrastructure of the stations themselves?
Well, that's a good question. I'm reading the question on behalf of a resident
right.
who wasn't able to
Yeah.
be here. So I'm going to suggest it. Let's take the first one. Let's pretend that this person is talking about the public realm. So what opportunity exists, if anything, further for the public to have a hand in the design in and around those immediate transit stations?
Okay. Maybe I'll throw it to Jessica in the LRT office just to speak about sort of the a public realm, and then we can speak to sort of private development in and around it.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Charlie. So there are ongoing discussions as the design of the project is being refined to meet city's guidelines for complete streets, walkability, sustainability, being climate resilient in all of the things that we build going forward, as well as public realm improvements that can be created in line with the different station builds. So there are a number of folks on my team who are working on urban design and factoring in the wants and needs of the communities along the corridor, what they want to see. And we've worked really closely with the Hamilton Community Benefits Network, who have gathered countless hours of information from communities from east to west for what they want to see implemented along the corridor now and into the future. So we have a lot of information about what people want to see and how to get involved. And if you wanted to send me an email afterwards, I can connect you with the group that is doing a lot of their very valuable consultation about how the community can get involved, provide feedback and what they want to see on the corridor.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Just to the resident who asked the question, and you'll be watching, I think, this when you get home, perhaps, or earlier or later this week. I guess what I would say to that is I strongly share, I think, the values that are embedded in your question, in that the success of the city the success of high order transit. And the success, I think, of our neighborhoods is going to be heavily dependent on the opportunity for us to comfortably move around and to take space. And that's, I think, what placemaking is all about, in that there are places for us to meet up, to see each other. And from there, it becomes a place where the private sector wishes to be. It becomes a place where where it's comfortable for you to wait for that train. And it necessarily becomes a place of, whether it be an incubator place almost for development, for placemaking, and all of those different values and designs will help in determining or further determining the success of high order transit and our neighborhoods overall. So I'm with you on that, and I know Jessica is very. All of the people are on here, but very in tune with those goals and objectives. So if you're hoping and wanting to participate further, please reach out also to the LRT office or myself, and we can coordinate something. Thank you. Those are the questions.
If I could just jump in on that question again, I just wanted to mention that, you know, even though we're here talking about densities and things like that, it's not to say that any comments that people want to make about this project that maybe go beyond the technical and get into more of that, like livable communities and you know, desire for certain elements in the public realm and urban design, those comments are all valuable. And so I would encourage, you know, encourage people to make comments about what they want what they want to have these areas look like in the future, and then we can consider, you know, how we adapt that into our policies when we're at that stage.
There's an opportunity through this study and exercise to also look at setting affordability targets for MTAs and PMTAs, and looking at preserving existing affordability and increasing affordable housing supply, recognizing that transit development can have a negative impact on affordability. And she says she understands this is very different from what the province is asking for.
Yeah, I can speak to that one. So I'm within the planning department. Another project that we've been working on, and we do expect will be coming forward to planning committee soon, is a rental housing protection bylaw, which is really focused on not ensuring that new development includes a certain amount of affordable housing, but making sure that people within like existing, whether it's subsidized housing or just older market housing that may be redeveloped as a result of, you know, new intensification. A rental housing protection bylaw it's a tool that allows the city to require that tenants within existing rental buildings that are being redeveloped into, you know, more rental units or condo units. It's a way of requiring that the developer of those make sure that the tenants in the existing building have an opportunity to move into the new building, paying the same rent that they're paying now. So, you know, if it is a rent protected unit and they're currently paying under market rates, they would continue to pay below market rates in that new unit under the same protection as that's given under the province of Ontario rent control. So there is a webpage with this work, a rental housing protection policy review, and we have wrapped up sort of the public feedback, but it is something that the planning department is going to be moving forward to planning committee shortly on, and in my opinion would have a big impact in sort of helping ensure that people aren't displaced by, you know, new development coming forward. So stay tuned for that. And we don't work in housing services or housing Hamilton, but I imagine that there are other programs that Councillor Wilson may be aware of too.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the input that Charlie just offered. I think the things that Charlie was talking about is there is a clear acknowledgement on behalf of this municipality and a growing number of municipalities that very much we support high order transit. In my opinion, Hamilton LRT presents a once in a generational opportunity to reimagine and redesign this city. It is also not without potential negative consequence. And that's, we know that the land in and around high order transit areas becomes much more valuable because of the potential and the opportunity that high order transit provides. So the policies and programs that Charlie was referencing, those are designed to try and provide some stability to the existing stock that we have that provides for affordable housing within the private sector. We know that's been very difficult. We have lost over 16,000 low income private provided affordable housing units, which are $750 a month in the last decade. So what Charlie's referenced is trying to use different tools in which to retain that which we have. Very difficult. But there's another part of this in what can we do as a municipality with different partners to try and not just retain, but to grow that stock. That's going to take investment. That's going to take very intentional plans, policies, and partnerships. And if you're interested in what that might look like, you can have a look at what's called the City of Hamilton's Housing Sustainable Investment Roadmap. I always get the names mixed up in the order, but we just had an overview of it yesterday at General Issues Committee, and it is being intentional in our investments and in our plans. So it's a really, really important point that whoever made it in the Q&A. Thank you.
Here's to wrap up our Q&A for this evening. So thank you very much.
So thank you to everybody who has joined us tonight. It's I appreciate, at least from my perspective, that talking about MTSAs is it's kind of heavy, but it is fundamentally going to impact the look and the feel and provide great opportunities, I think, for this city moving forward, and predictability so that we can provide the variety of housing stock that is so important to this generation, to future generations, and to optimize the possibility of high order transit. We need density in order to provide riders and to make those lines successful, so we can continue to invest in and build out high order transit in this city. But I really appreciate your interest, and I hope you will continue to follow along and participate. These are your neighborhoods in your city, and it's wonky, but it's wonderful. How's that for a selling point? So thank you to everybody who participated tonight. I'd like to thank the staff from the City of Hamilton, Lauren and Dave and Charlie and Jessica, and then thanks for everyone for taking time out of your night to join us. Thanks.